My name is Leslie.
And my name is Aiden, and today we want to talk to you about something groundbreaking. It's called the Constitution.
Okay, this may sound strange and you probably don't know this, but here in America we've been living a grand experiment for approximately 250 years. And what do we call this experiment? Anyone?
We call it democracy. Everyone around the world knows the word now, but back in the 1700s, democracy was an experiment. And yes, it still is to this day.
We wouldn't have America or democracy without the Constitution. The Founding Fathers hammered out this written document in 1789, but it may not really be accurate to call it a document, because the Constitution really is an organic, living, breathing roadmap to democracy. A GPS for the present and the future.
The Constitution is a document that our Founding Fathers felt was important for this country because it sets out the fundamental principles and the basic structure of government. It also guarantees the natural rights of the citizens. So, as one of our former lieutenant governors used to call it, the owner's manual.
Our Constitution, both our state Constitution and our federal Constitution, actually, set up the role of each player, the role of the citizens, and also the role of our government, and of course our three branches of government, executive, legislative, and judiciary.
Well, we need a Constitution because it really, in a lot of ways, it holds us together. In fact, one of the things that's true about world history ever since America's been around is that our greatest export, it's not automobiles or Levi's or computers or whatever else. Our greatest export is our democracy.
Democracy is a rule of government by the people. The people elect the representatives that makes the laws for that government in that country.
The Constitution starts with 3 words, we the people. In the 18th century, those words were startling, revolutionary, and still are in some parts of the world. It was hard to imagine a government for and by the people, and yet, here we are.
The Founding Fathers wanted to make sure that we would never be ruled by tyrants or that one branch of the government could dominate the other. So, they created a checks and balances system. First, there's the legislative branch made up of representatives and senators that are elected by us. Congress makes the laws. Then there's the executive branch. That would be the president who is elected by us, who through agencies and officials administers and enforces laws and government. And finally, there's the judicial branch, which interprets the laws.
One of the most important aspects of our government is that there are 3 separate co-equal branches of government. Each one tends to check the other over time, and that's a critical part of governmental structure.
I believe that the most important aspect of our government is the creation of the balance of powers, or separation of powers, whereby no one person and no one branch controls or governs completely and absolutely.
Each one of those 3 branches of government have 3 different responsibilities, and they respect each other. Sometimes there's tension between the branches, but they all try to work together in order to serve the people of the United States.
The federal judges are appointed. On the state level, judges are primarily elected.
You have the national government, which was established in the U.S. Constitution, and then you have the state government that was established in the Arkansas Constitution. They're very similar in many ways, but they address issues differently because you've got the federal government, which is for all of the states, whereas the state government document is just for the state of Arkansas.
Oftentimes, these governments, they serve in the same geographical area, like our state of Arkansas, and sometimes they have concurrent. They share some of the same interests, sometimes they are different, but do similar things, like both state and federal government can impose taxes, can build roads, and establish courts. However, if there is a conflict of law, federal law will always preempt state law.
Every branch of democracy is equally important. In this video, we will talk specifically about the judicial branch. There are several core principles that guide the judicial system. We'll start with the rule of law, which resolves disputes and sets boundaries for our behaviors.
Okay, say you and your sister are arguing over an iPad. You think it's yours, she thinks it's hers. What happens? Your mom comes in and she settles the argument. Finish, done. No talking back, no whining. Well, maybe a little bit of whining.
Or you don't have a driver's license, but you still want to take the family car out for a spin. What would your dad say or do?
Well, laws govern our lives, whether at home or in society. Without the rule of law, there would be chaos with everyone running around doing whatever they wanted to do without regard to how that affects a family member, a friend, or a total stranger. At home, it's mom or dad resolving disputes and setting boundaries. But in society, judges make the decision.
Why do we need the rule of law? To prevent chaos, anarchy. My study of history throughout the world is people don't revolt, overthrow their government because of one bad law or a bad leader. It's when the law that is on the books is not applied to everyone equally. They can't get a fair chance.
I think the rule of law, to me, particularly as a justice on the Supreme Court, is something that I apply equally to all the litigants in my court or in our court, and that we've got a rule book and we play by those rules.
Everyone is bound by the rule of law because our system is predicated on everyone being equal. The words of Jefferson, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men, I'll add women, are created equal. If that doesn't occur, you have no rule of law.
The rule of law also preserves and enforces our rights granted by the Constitution, like freedom of speech, freedom to worship, and a right to a trial, just to name a few.
Can you imagine being arrested for speaking out against the government? Or being told you couldn't practice your religion? Or being kept in jail on someone's whim? The law protects us. Before democracy, those things happen and still do in some places of the world.
The most important thing to me about our constitutional government in the United States is that it ensures the freedom of its citizens, and it does it in many different ways. But one of the most important things is that it ensures that we have certain basic rights and privileges as a U.S. citizen.
It's important that we preserve individual rights in the constitutions because constitutions protect the citizens themselves from government actors. And the citizens themselves need to know what those rights are, and the most assured way that they can check their rights and make sure that they are being honored and vindicated when need be is that they be placed in a written document so that judges and lawyers can make the case for an individual rights violation when someone thinks it has occurred.
It's necessary to protect individual rights in the Constitution because those are the rights that we have as humans. And it's even more important to have them written down in the Constitution because it lets us know as United States citizens what rights we have that are protected, but also gives us a way to make sure those rights are protected, and if they're not being protected, to enforce those rights or seek some sort of recourse to make sure we are able to enjoy those individual rights we have.
The rule of law also checks the executive and legislative branches of government. Sometimes lawmakers pass crazy bills that may take away our rights. And sometimes a president or governor exceeds authority. When that happens, the court steps in to protect us.
We know what the legislature does, and we know what lanes they are in. We know the responsibility of the executive, and I know the responsibility of the judiciary. And sometimes I see myself as a gatekeeper because so many things that have happened in the legislature and executive branch ultimately end up here. We do not make the law, but we do have to interpret the law.
Without the rule of law, there could be riots in the streets or even dictators. The rule of law protects all of us while laying the blueprint to follow.
Another core principle of law is a fair and independent judiciary. You can have the best set of laws in the world, but unless you have impartial people sitting on benches, the system really wouldn't be very fair.
Now, I hate picking on our parents, but why not? If you have a brother or sister and you get into an argument, who settles it? Right, either your mother or father. Have you ever felt they might be favoring your sibling's side of things?
Sure you do, but You might be so caught up in the moment that you can't see who is right and who is wrong.
So your parent is acting as a judge. Real judges are neutral decision makers who take an oath to uphold laws, who rely on the body of law to make a decision.
When I was elected to the Arkansas Supreme Court, I took an oath and I said, I, Courtney Ray Hudson, do solemnly swear that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Arkansas, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of Associate Justice of the Arkansas Supreme Court, upon which I am now about to enter. So help me God. So what does that mean? It means that I have taken a solemn pledge to uphold our rule of law, to put the rule of law first, to allow it to govern rather than me and rather than my personal beliefs.
When judges rule from the bench on objections and other evidentiary issues, we don't rule in a willy-nilly fashion. We have to follow the rules of evidence and the rules of procedure as set forth. You have these rules so that a trial is fair.
Judges make decisions on two different types of laws, civil and criminal. But how do you distinguish between the two?
Civil law is an area of law where people with private disputes go to settle whatever claims they have. So for example, if you're driving in your automobile and you accidentally rear end somebody, then it's going to be civil law that's going to decide what the compensation should be and whether you're going to owe the other driver anything. Or if you have a contract and there's a dispute over whether the contract is enforceable or whether someone ought to be compensated for a breach, it's civil law that covers those disputes. But the key thing about civil law is that it's generally between private parties. Criminal law is an area where the government is enforcing the law as it pertains to society as a general. Whenever there are certain actions taken, it has an effect on the entire community, such as murder, assault, theft, and things of that nature. And so it's criminal law that decides the procedures and penalties for those types of actions.
Whether making a decision on civil or criminal laws, you can think of a judge as sort of a soccer or a football referee.
Or a tennis or baseball ump. We may not always agree on the call, but from an impartial standpoint, they are doing as best as humanly possible following a set of rules. Now, we may think we know the rules, but they are the experts.
I'm sure everyone has watched a game where we heard fans booing a call. Well, those boos should make no difference on how the call is made. For judges, there are constitutional safeguards to protect them from being influenced by politicians, wealthy people, or popular opinion.
Federal judges are appointed by the President of the United States. However, it is the United States Senate that confirms those judges, and they serve lifetime appointments. Now, this is very different from how we select judges in Arkansas. Generally speaking, we elect judges in Arkansas. And in my personal opinion, I believe that that is the better way of governing because it allows the people to have a direct voice in who and how judges operate.
As a judge, I work for the people of the state of Arkansas. It's very big, and we judges on the Court of Appeals take it very seriously and never forget who we are serving while we issue our opinions and make our judgments.
Obviously, not everyone will agree with a judge's decision. There will be some people who will just see things differently. So what happens if you feel very strongly that the judge has made the wrong decision? Is there a video review like the NBA?
There is a process in law called appeals. On the federal and state levels, there are appellate judges and courts. You can ask these judges to review a lower court decision to see whether they agree. If they do, the ruling is confirmed. If not, the ruling is overturned. Now, sometimes they send the case back to the lower court for further review.
There are two appellate courts in Arkansas. The intermediate court is the Court of Appeals. The higher appellate court, the final appellate court of the state, so to speak, is the Arkansas Supreme Court. And it has the last word on any case that it decides to take.
The Arkansas Supreme Court is the highest court in Arkansas. So we'll make the final decision on all cases that come through the court systems in Arkansas. And as a result, we set the precedent. We set the rule of law, what the law is going to be in the future. We also have authority over the courts of Arkansas and how they're going to be conducted and the rules that apply to those courts.
Sitting above all appellate courts is the Supreme Court. Every state has one. And above those courts is the U.S. Supreme Court. You can't go any higher than that. They can choose to hear an appeal or to not hear an appeal.
It is the court of last resort.
The U.S. Supreme Court's rulings are final. End of story. Case closed.
Equal justice under law is another core principle. It is so important that those words are chiseled onto the front of the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. But what does that even mean, equal justice?
There is a clause in the Declaration of Independence stating that everyone is created equal. And so in our court system, it doesn't matter who you are. You could be a rich politician or you might be some poor musician.
So you might want to think equal justice in terms of having access to the law. That means having your day in court where you are treated the same no matter your color, no matter what you do for a living, no matter how much money you have in the bank.
We have equal justice for all because the courts try to strike a balance between the people that have means and the people that don't by providing pro bono representation for individuals, and that is appointing an attorney free of charge. And in criminal cases and in civil cases, people can access the court's discretionary power of fee waivers. And also, the Administrative Office of the Courts has implemented programs that allow people who are not native English speakers to get interpreting services.
Now, let's look at something that makes a very important point. And most of us have seen this before, the scales of justice. You see a lady justice wearing a blindfold. The blindfold represents impartial treatment. The scales are weighing evidence. In her world, everyone is treated the same, fairly, and only the truth matters.
Now, Lady Justice is nothing new. You can find her on murals in ancient Greece,
or in paintings in ancient Egypt. But what we have done in America is turn her into law, giving all of us equal rights to justice.
The last core principle and one of the most important in the Constitution is trial by jury. What exactly does that mean? It means we have a right to be judged by a jury of our peers, people just like us who listen to facts and evidence in a trial and decide on our guilt or innocence.
Say you're charged for committing a crime like vandalism or assault. Now, it wouldn't be very fair to let the accuser decide whether you are guilty. That decision in this country is made by an impartial panel of people chosen by the court.
You have to be 18 years old to serve on a jury. You have to be able to speak, understand, and write the English language. And if you are a person, you can't have a disability that will impact your ability to understand what's going on in the proceedings. And if you've been convicted of a felony and not been pardoned, you won't be able to serve. And so what we're looking for in a jury of our peers is that no particular demographic, that means no type of person, is excluded from the jury. So everyone of every gender, race, national origin, to make sure that the jury pool looks like society. We just want it to be fair.
A jury is extremely important because they are the conscience of the community. They are the ones who are going to determine and decide, what we will and what we will not accept as conduct in our communities. That jury protects the rights of each individual because they understand as well that they could be dependent upon just such a situation themselves one day, and your result from a jury is only going to be as good as the people that serve.
Once a jury is impaneled, the real work begins. 12 people would sit in a box like this and listen to arguments made by the defense and prosecutor. Besides the argument, the jury also would hear witness testimony and evaluate evidence.
The judge will act as a referee, making sure that everybody follows procedures and that no one has an unfair advantage.
When it is those closer cases where evidence on both sides is fairly equal, then that is when you really work your hardest to make sure that one side or the other does not get an untoward advantage by some means that violates the rules of conduct or the rules of procedure in a trial.
A lawyer plays a very important role in a jury trial. They serve as a representative for their client. They typically act and speak on behalf of their client. They will ask questions to bring out evidentiary testimony. They will introduce evidence to the jury to give them an idea of what's going on and present their client's entire story, their case, if you will.
So jurors are to listen to the evidence and to make a finding of the facts. What that means is when you go to be a juror, you bring all your common sense and life experience with you, and you listen to each side, and then you go in the jury room and you determine what really happened. So it's your duty to decide the facts.
Being on a jury is a pretty heavy thing. Just think, a juror makes a decision that affects a person for the rest of his or her life. That is a huge responsibility.
Being on jury duty is also a privilege and a public service. In fact, outside of serving in the military, jury duty is one of the best ways to show patriotism.
Jury duty is a privilege because it gives an ordinary citizen an opportunity to participate in our judicial system and make decisions on cases that are presented in court. Serving on the jury is a powerful position because the jury is making decisions that will affect people's lives not only now but also in their future.
We covered a lot of ground in this documentary about the rule of law, equal justice, a fair and impartial judiciary, and trial by jury.
Here are some closing thoughts by Arkansas's leading judges, educators, and lawmakers.
I think the most important thing about our system of government is that we have a Constitution that sets out what the rights of the people are and our freedoms are, and also it sets limits on our government and sets a check and balance system for our different branches of government.
I think the fact that the courts exist to help enforce individual rights. I think that's really important, whether it's the government overstepping or another individual, you always have a remedy there in the courts, and I think that's really important.
That everyone, regardless of their gender, economic status, or race, can stand before the bar of law as equal.
Our constitutions, they're flawed because we're flawed. And it's not a perfect system, but it's the best that we can come up with.
One time, President Woodrow Wilson said that America is the only idealistic nation in the world, and he's right. If you just think about these words, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we take those words literally in the United States. Unlike most other countries, we mean it when we say it. So that's one of the great distinctives of America and our American system of government.
The most important part of our system of government is that ultimately the people rule.
The lawyers of Arkansas bring you this gift so that you will understand the rule of law. Men and women have died on American soil and around the world in defense of the rule of law. The rule of law remains under assault every day, and it could become simply a memory in only one generation. We're counting on you to be sure that doesn't happen. The Arkansas Bar Association thanks the Arkansas Supreme Court and every person on both sides of the camera that made this production possible. Good day, and may God bless.